Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tessa Archibald. I manage the Homes for Horses Coalition. We have some really accomplished professionals to speak on our subject today, and I really look forward to hearing from them. We have 3 guests joining us today, so I will go ahead and introduce everybody, and then we can go ahead and get started. First speaking today will be Dr. Mary Lou Randour, a psychologist and senior advisor of the Animals and Family Violence Program of Animal Welfare Institute. She received a PhD from the University of Maryland, won an NIMH postdoctoral fellowship, and was a clinical fellow in psychology at Cambridge Hospital at Harvard Medical School. She has published extensively on the subject of family violence and animals, is the author of handbooks such as A Common Bond, Child Maltreatment and Animals and Family, and has published articles in numerous professional journals, including Criminal Justice Policy Review and Violence Against Women. In her career, Dr. Randour has worked for a federal research-funded agency and enjoyed a private practice for almost 20 years. She now devotes her knowledge of psychology to advance animal welfare protection and its connection to human welfare, working in partnership with organizations such as the Battered Women's Justice Project, the National Animal Care and Control Association, the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence, and the National Sheriff's Association. I'm so grateful to have Mary Lou joining us today. Also from Animal Welfare Institute, we have Nancy Blaney. Nancy has advocated on behalf of animals for more than 40 years. She is the Director of Government Affairs at Animal Welfare Institute, where she works with federal and state legislators, the law enforcement community, veterinarians, and other interest groups to improve animal welfare, the prosecution of animal cruelty crimes, and public awareness of the relationship between animal abuse and other forms of violence, particularly all forms of family violence. Nancy serves on multiple boards, including the Animal Cruelty Advisory Council of the Prosecuting Attorneys and the National Sheriff's Association's Animal Cruelty and Abuse Committee. She provides education through presentations to judges, law enforcement, prosecutors, domestic violence and animal welfare advocates, among others. Nancy is the author of several articles and chapters focusing on the links between animal cruelty and domestic violence, including protecting domestic violence victims by protecting their pets, and animal abuse as a type of trauma, lessons for human and animal service professionals. Again, I'm so grateful to have such accomplished professionals speaking with us today, including Myra Rasnick from Ahimsa House in Georgia, where she serves as the executive director. Myra has 22 years of experience in crisis intervention, victim service delivery, and program development. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology with a concentration in women's studies. Myra's career has been dedicated to ending violence against women and serving survivors of sexual and domestic violence. Myra is also an avid animal lover. She developed and implemented Ahimsa House's direct services program, as well as training domestic violence shelter staff throughout Georgia on the link between domestic violence and animal cruelty. Myra conducts professional trainings to a variety of animal welfare and human services agencies. In 2019, Myra was named to the Banfield Foundation Safer Together Initiative Advisory Committee, an initiative to raise awareness of the link between domestic violence and animal abuse by providing continuing education for the veterinary profession specifically. She also sits on the board of directors for Paws Between Homes, an organization assisting individuals with pets facing eviction. I'm so grateful that Myra was able to join us today as well and share her experience and knowledge on this subject. So before we get started, just a couple of Zoom reminders. If all of our guests could stay on mute, that would be fantastic, just so we can focus on our speakers. This meeting is going to be recorded, so no worries there. And if we have any questions at all, feel free to put them right in the chat and we'll get to them as soon as possible or at the end of our presentation. So with that being said, with all of our wonderful presenters introduced, Dr. Randour, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Tessa, for the introduction. And I thought as you were reading it to remind myself to make it shorter. But my real bona fides for this group, other than what Tessa told you about me, is that my 2 very first favorite books were Black Beauty and My Friend Flicka. And my first career aspiration was to raise horses in Wyoming. Obviously, I didn't do that. I was kind of there was a setback when I got onto a horse at a riding stable and the horse walked back into the stall with me on it. So I thought maybe this isn't my fort. So anyway, I'm glad to be here. I'm going to just give you a quick overview of the abundant research that links animal abuse with domestic violence, which is undergirds kind of all the work that we do and is a rationale for it. And so that's my name again. So again, it's domestic violence and animal abuse where pets are both the pawns and the victims in the situation, but they also are a source of healing. The history of the link between interpersonal violence and animal abuse goes back to really 1984, which is quite a few years now. And Lenore Walker was one of the first well-known people talking about domestic violence. And she recognized back then that batterer used threats to pets or the actual harm to coerce domestic violence victims. And in fact, I think many of you may be familiar with the wheel. It's called the power and control wheel, used by advocates of victims of domestic violence, and pet abuse is one of the forms of intimidation that is in that wheel. So there was early recognition of the link, but what there wasn't was a lot of empirical research, but that has changed. And I'm going to talk about some of that. Some of the research that was done were surveys, where they would survey people who were going into a domestic violence agency. And as you can see from the first slide, in this one particular survey of almost 300 mothers and their children, 56% of the women reported that their partners had either threatened, harmed, or killed a family pet. Another type of survey was done where they took the largest domestic violence organization in each state, NDC, and they surveyed the staff rather than the women themselves that were entering. And in that case, 83% of the staff said, yes, they had observed such an overlap. And then another one that looked at women entering shelters in Utah in one state found 71%. So you can see the percentages vary, but they're all high, that this co-occurrence of domestic violence and pet abuse. And it makes sense when you think about it, because if somebody is abusing one member of the household, they're often abusing or threatening other members as well. They don't isolate or limit themselves to one. Then there are also comparison longitudinal studies, and a lot of times social scientists like these because they want to say compared to what, or they want to know how something appears over time. So instead of the surveys, which gave you kind of a glimpse of that one moment in time, you can see this survey this study lasted almost 7 years. It was conducted in 11 metropolitan areas. Lots of women participated, had a comparison group, and one of the many things that they discovered was that pet abuse was one of 4 factors associated with battering. And then another study was a comparison study where they took women from domestic violence shelters, but they compared them to a group of women who were not abused and not in domestic violence shelters, and asked them about pet abuse. And as you can see, because I highlighted it in bold, women in shelters were 11 times more likely than those in the community sample to report that the partners had hurt or killed a family pet. So again, a pretty dramatic evidence that pet abuse and domestic violence occur in the same households. And then there are people who have looked at the criminal records of in these cases of men. And in this first one, 150 men who were charged with some kind of animal cruelty between 5 years. They were able to examine their criminal records, and 41% had been arrested for interpersonal violence. And then an FBI study looked at the criminal records of 259 men who had been convicted for animal cruelty. And because it was the FBI or people working for the FBI, they were able to pull the records from the local police and get a good glimpse, not more than a glimpse, a good insight into all of the different crimes that the person had committed over time. And in this case, 60% had also been arrested for domestic violence, which either preceded or succeeded the animal cruelty arrest. So once again, more evidence, piling upon more and more evidence that there is a link here that's important to pay attention to. So one of the things that we do is to encourage any domestic violence organizations or anybody that is coming into contact with domestic violence victims or potential ones is to ask questions about their pets. They may not bring up the topic unless you do. So do you have pet or pets? Ask if the pet's been injured. Has the pet ever been killed? Ask if they have a safe place for their pet if they seek shelter. And then to let them know that if they want safety, there are resources for their pet while they seek safety. Also, there are resources available. And then also what's been happening lately now, 37 states have passed legislation that permits pets to be included in temporary and permanent restraining orders. So that's also another resource. Safe havens for pets of domestic violence victims. Many years ago, we were aware, like 12 or 13 years ago, that it was, people use the word organic a lot, but this really was an organic movement where over the United States in different communities began to recognize the need for people seeking shelter for from domestic violence also needed shelter for their pets, and there wasn't any. So local communities organized in their own way a safe haven for pets of domestic violence victims. And there are different models. It depends on the community, and some are hybrid models. Some do co-housing of domestic violence survivors and their pets, meaning they reside in the same place, either in the same room or within the same structure. One survey we did found that 25% of the people that were providing shelter were local vets who were helping out. Fostering is another popular method where the animal may go into a foster care while the woman and her children seek shelter somewhere else. And then sometimes it's extra kennel space. And then there's yet another one, which Myra will talk about, which is the Ahimsa House model, which is very effective and serves the whole state of Georgia. So what we did when we realized that this was happening nationally is went about trying to identify each one. And it took a while, like 7 years, I think, but these things take time. And so we now have a directory of safe havens, and it's searchable by zip code. We have about 1,200 entries. We verify the information on a continuing basis. And then when you go to the website, you can see the last date that the information was verified. And as we became aware that there were some situations where the pet wasn't necessarily a dog, a cat, but perhaps a larger animal like a horse, that it was necessary to also realize that these situations also happened. So now that we're re-verifying, we're asking questions about the capacity of the particular entity to handle large animals such as horses. Our Safe Havens website link is right there. It's also on the website of the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And that concludes my portion, and Nancy's going to talk to you about policy and a little bit about where the money is, I think.
Yes, thanks, Mary Lou. Hello to everybody. And I know that among the attendees here are both members of the coalition, the Homes for Horses Coalition, as well as members of the domestic violence service community. So you all are folks who probably need to talk to one another, want to talk to one another. for the service providers who are looking for places where they can help their clients who are coming to them with large animals, particularly horses in your case, and you in the coalition who may be looking to see if your services are a way to provide services beyond beyond the community to domestic violence survivors if you're not already doing that. So let's see. There we go. So for you all, both domestic violence service providers and for the members of the coalition, the thing that's most important for you that has been done on either the federal or the state level is the Pet and Women's Safety Act, which was incorporated into the Farm Bill in 2018 as the Protecting Animals with Shelter provision that actually provides grants to help you help domestic violence victims who have and are specifically mentioned, interestingly, in the law, pets, service animals, emotional support animals, and horses. Now, we all thought, why were horses kind of teased out of all of that? But this was, a bit of a compromise so that there was not, sort of an uprising that this was going to include livestock. We all know how, what a third rail that can be, but recognizing that horses can be companion animals as well. And so they wanted to be sure that they were included, which is fantastic, because way back when we were all just really starting to look at this issue. In Maine being the first state that adopted the Pets on Protection Order law, it was actually a case of an individual who had large animals, who was looking for a place of safety for them. That was the impetus for all of this. So interestingly, the history goes back to that. Next one. So the couple of slides here, and of course, this webinar is going to be available to you, and the slides will also be available to you. So you can see here the information about what this is, what they're for, what the grants are eligible for, what they can be used for, and who is eligible to get them. So it can be for construction and operating expenses. Housing may be co-located at the domestic violence shelter or within the community. So it really acknowledges that there are a lot of models for how this can happen. Get the next one. It's not only for, on-site housing, but short-term shelter and housing assistance and support services. And also training can be eligible for grants. So there's just a lot of ways for those of you who are providing these services that's like, well, we just don't have the space to build something. We don't have the space or the resources for this, that other things that can be done to help these individuals find placement and safety for their animals can be eligible for these grants. Assistance is available for a survivor for up to 2 years with an extension, recognizing that it is not always easy for these individuals to find permanent housing. So there's some flexibility was built into the law. And as you can see, eligible entities, the bullet point number 4, organizations that work directly with pets, service and support animals, or horses. So they are directly named in the eligible entities, such as shelters, animal welfare organizations, and who collaborate with the other named entities. So it's out there. It is a possibility. And I do believe, if I saw the roster correctly, that we have a PAWS grant recipient in the audience. So there are other tools. I just wanted to mention to you just a couple of other things out there that impinge on domestic violence survivors and pets, and how all of these things kind of work together. The PAWS Act also changed federal law, interestingly, federal law with regard to stalking, harassing, and interstate violation of protection orders. So if an animal is included on a protection order and the individual who is covered crosses state lines in order to harass or threaten the individual and the pet, that is now a federal offense. So that is really extraordinary. The federal government is not big on creating new offenses, and here it has. Goes also for stalking. So if an individual is being stalked and is being placed in fear of harm or death to the pet, that is now a federal offense. So something to keep in mind if you're working with this community. And on to the next one. Protection orders, as Mary Lou mentioned, 37 states, District of Columbia and Puerto Rico have laws specifically allowing pets to be included on protection orders. On our website, we have manuals for how to do that. We haven't gotten all of the states covered yet, but we're really working on it. So individuals can go to our website, find a manual that just will say, here's what your state allows and how to go about making use of that. And we found some really interesting usage data. There aren't a lot of data out there, but Minnesota instituted their law in 2010. So at that time, 167 such orders included pets. In 3 years, pets had been added to over 1,000 orders, which was just extraordinary. In New York, the number of protection orders that included companion animals increased by 33% over the prior year, and the number of final orders of protection issued in family court increased by 75%. So this is something that's used and valuable. In addition to including them on protection orders, domestic violence definitions have been changed in some places to include abuse of pets, so that now is an offense under the domestic violence statute. So it's not just a matter of including them on protection orders, but it also can be an actual domestic violence offense. Exposing children to animal cruelty. Some states have enhanced penalties for that. This is something that hasn't caught as much of a groundswell as some of the other efforts, especially with regard to protection orders, but it is something to be aware of if your state includes that, where children who are exposed to animal cruelty, sometimes forced to participate in it, can bring about an enhanced penalty for that animal cruelty crime. Cross-reporting is something that all of you may at some point find yourselves participating in, wondering about, but more and more states are getting active about requiring or at least encouraging cross-reporting among agencies. So that would be among humane law enforcement, social service providers, child abuse and elder abuse protection offices, where the idea is that it kind of takes a village, so that when you have something going on in a family, particularly as many people know, neighbors are more likely to report when they see animals being mistreated. That's something that's easy to see. They often are reluctant if they see children who look unkempt, that may just be a family thing, but if they see animals, more likely to report it. And that often can be, just a foot in the door to see what's going on in a family where children may be in danger, where an elder person may be in danger. So that cross-reporting has actually been quite successful where it has been implemented. And in Ohio, we just got a law passed last year with regard to that, and everyone has been very positive about the increased relationships that has encouraged, and the fact that people are becoming more aware of situations that require their attention. And one other thing I wanted to mention, because all of you, again, may find yourselves with an opportunity to participate in coordinated community response teams. And these are kind of just cross-reporting writ large and formalized, where you will have task forces, response teams, whatever they're called, that bring together those service providers in a community to kind of talk about what they're seeing, what they're doing, whom they're working with, how they can be helpful to one another, who may need additional help somewhere. Oftentimes these CCRTs do not include someone from the animal protection community, or they don't include somebody from the sheltering community or veterinarians or humane law enforcement. So we have tried to encourage that these teams be expanded to include those who represent the animal protection part of things, so that everyone is talking to one another. So this may be something that you find out about in your community, and you can just raise your hand and say, hey, you know what, this may be something that we would be interested in. And the last couple of slides are some additional resources, where you can go for additional resources, where there may be funds for assistance with sheltering, whether it's direct assistance to the individual to help them with costs, or assistance to the service provider. So just some additional information for you. And with that, I will turn it over to Myra. And thank you, Tessa, for stepping in there. We did not see that miracle that I was promising.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm working on getting mine up now. Do you see it?
Yes, looks great.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So I just kind of wanted to start by giving a little bit of background about Ahimsa House. We are a bit of a unique organization. I don't know of another statewide serving organization that addresses the link between family violence and animal cruelty. So I just kind of wanted to give an overview first of what we do and how we work. So we were founded in 2004. Next year will be our 20th anniversary. And we were founded by a survivor named Emily Christie because of a lived experience. She found herself in a violent relationship, and she left, and she took her cat, Luna, with her to a shelter and showed up, and they told her, I'm sorry, there's nowhere for pets here. You can't bring your pet. So she had the choice of either trying to figure out something for Luna or go back to the relationship. So she actually found an acquaintance to care for Luna for her while she was staying in shelter, and ended up losing contact with them, was never able to reach them again, and never saw her cat again. So out of that was this idea, as Mary Lou was saying, this was a very organic thing in the beginning. And so Emily came up with this here in Georgia on her own because she experienced this. So she decided that nobody should have to choose between their safety and that of a beloved pet. So on her own, she got our 501c3 and just started a very grassroots effort. She chose the name Ahimsa House because Ahimsa is the Sanskrit principle meaning nonviolence. Since then, we have also become a licensed animal rescue organization, although that's not our main focus. And we're also a certified victim service agency here in Georgia. We operated at the time when Emily was around, we operated an animal care facility until 2006, but that was just becoming too much for her and everyone else. We were getting inundated with phone calls at the time as word of our services spread across Georgia. She was located in Metro Atlanta, and she was driving on her own 4 hours away to pick up an animal to bring it back to the shelter, and then coordinating everything became a lot. So when they decided to close down that facility at the end of 2006, I came on in the spring of 2007 to sort of create what we now call our decentralized program, which is we operate in an office outside of Metro Atlanta, but our services are available statewide. We developed a network of boarding facilities, veterinary offices, and foster homes throughout Georgia to provide care for pets while their owners seek safety. So of our services, we provide a 24-hour crisis line where we offer assistance and referrals to domestic violence shelter, law enforcement, and other services. So many times we're their first call because people will Google or look up, for their pet information for their pets before they even will themselves. So sometimes we're that first contact, and we're able to put them in contact with human service providers. We also get referrals, of course, when people are going into shelters. We work closely with the domestic violence shelters here in Georgia. We also provide safety planning over the hotline, and we include pets as part of that safety plan. So all of our advocates are trained domestic violence advocates. We help with establishing proof of ownership of pets. This can be an issue, especially when survivors and abusers are going to be going back and forth to court. We've seen them try to get custody of the pets before. That's just something that they'll use to try to lure people back. So if I get custody of the pet, I know you're going to come with them, so you'll come back home. So we see that a lot, not because they necessarily care about caring for the pets. So we try to help with that up front so that it doesn't become an issue at a later court date. We help with listing pets on protective orders. I know we've talked about that some. So as they said, research your state's ex parte orders. Here in Georgia, we're not one of those 37 states that have it explicitly written out in law. However, we do have pets included on the ex parte order. What's weird is that it's not included on the petition itself. So if someone's going to go fill out that petition for the protective order, pets are not listed. So we help them. We've also educated the domestic violence advocates, legal advocates here in Georgia, anybody who may come in contact with a survivor who's filling one of these out, that pets in Georgia can be listed under personal property and other relief. And they can also list them as something to go back to the house of a law enforcement escort to retrieve. So we're a little unique. Then the order does have pets listed, but for whatever reason, it's not in our petition. We provide emergency shelter for pets while survivors stay at a domestic violence shelter or other temporary accommodation. So we don't require that our clients be seeking safety and shelter. They may go stay with friends or family, but can't have their pets there for whatever reason. Animals are housed via our network of boarding facilities and foster homes. We do provide protections against abusers attempting to locate the animal. In our case, with these foster homes, we are the intermediary. We contact the clients, we contact the foster homes, they do not contact each other. Also, if we're dealing with a rural area where that pet may be recognizable, we know to move that pet a few counties away to a different foster home or a different boarding facility where that abuser may not look if they think that they may try to find the animal. We provide transportation for pets within Georgia and out of state. We provide a lot of Uber and Lyft rides for clients and their pets because they may not have transportation, and getting out and getting that initial safety may be a big challenge. So we have a business account. We just call them Uber and get them there. Of course, horses are a whole different challenge, but we have helped horses, clients with horses before. And in those situations, we have a network of rescues that we work with horse boarding facilities, stables that we work with, and we have volunteers who have the ability to transport for us. And so usually they can do that pretty quickly, and we can coordinate a transport as quickly as we need. We provide veterinary care for injured or sick animals. We provide spay neuters. We also provide preventative vaccines for animals entering. Behavioral rehabilitation. So some of the pets that come into our program, I'm sure, as you can imagine, have experienced violence, have been in violent homes, and sometimes they're reactionary and they may have some behavioral concerns. A lot of times the pets have been isolated too, just like some of the humans in the home have been isolated. So we have partners that we work with where we're able to put those pets, specifically dogs usually, into care with these behavioral rehabilitationists. And then once they're able to reclaim their pets, they're much improved, their behavior is much improved. We also provide emergency hotel stays for our survivors while they're waiting on a shelter bed to open. Obviously, these have to be pet friendly, but we have a network that is able to assist us with that. And we provide assistance and advocacy in locating pet-friendly housing, and we also pay pet deposits for our survivors once they're reclaiming and going into safe and stable housing. A lot of times they have a pet deposit to pay, which can be anywhere from $100 to $700. I've seen them even more than that. And so this all came about organically for us because we were seeing that our reclaim rate was going down, and I started asking on the crisis line, why can't you reclaim your pet? And they would say, well, I have this big pet deposit. So we started paying pet deposits, and our reclaim rate last year was 92%. So it stayed around that 90% rate since we implemented that in 2010. And then of course, the pets and animals and their guardians are reunited once it's safe and they have housing. We also provide pet supplies for clients when they're reunited for their pet, whatever they may need. Sometimes they're starting over completely from scratch, so we'll give them whatever it is that they need. We provide advocacy for clients seeking the assistance of support animals in shelters. So we work closely with these shelters so we can contact them on the client's behalf if they feel like they need to keep that pet with them in shelter. And then we also provide pet supplies and veterinary care for survivors who are staying in shelters that do provide accommodations for pets and do allow pets on site. Outside of those services, we also provide consultation on documenting and prosecuting co-occurring animal cruelty and domestic violence. We've funded forensic veterinary investigations before for clients who say that their abusers have killed their pets. We provide coordination of referrals with other programs nationwide. We have an outreach and training program, so we train professionals in the field, human services professionals as well as animal service professionals. And we also have an outreach program that where we go out into the community to different events and festivals and set up a booth and try to raise awareness about what we do. And that's going to come into play in my survivor story in a minute. We do have a new initiative that we began 2 years ago at the request of the Georgia Family Violence Commission. They have a murder-suicide program, and they actually had a situation come up, and they say that they've had a few where the victim of domestic violence was murdered by their intimate partner, and they left a pet behind. In this particular first case we got, it was a dog who witnessed the murder, and then the mother of that victim was left to try to care for the dog, and she'd already suffered a lot of trauma and was experiencing a lot of grief, and then she had this additional animal to try to care for. The animal was traumatized. So they came to us to see what we could do, and we ended up putting that dog in with a behavioral professional, and they stayed with them for several weeks because she also had a dog of her own and they weren't getting along. And so anyway, that just really started this. We haven't had that many cases for this particular initiative, but it is interesting. It's something that has popped up a time or two of, pets being left behind, and those family members want to care for them, but it is a lot when they're going through that. So we've tried to support them through that first year of care and help them out in any way that we possibly can. And of course, since we're a licensed pet rescue, we also have the ability to adopt those pets out in circumstances that the surviving family member aren't able to actually keep them. And we provide assistance to any victim of domestic violence in Georgia. I said before, that includes those not going into shelter. Last year, about 30% of our clients did not stay in a domestic violence shelter. And this year, 44% of our requests have been from people not staying in a domestic violence shelter. Our only requirement is that they're seeking safety. This is for their safety, because if an abuser sees that if they stay at home, but they want their pet to be kept elsewhere, the abuser may see that as them making steps to leave. So that can be a really dangerous time. So when we're safety planning with someone, we safety plan for them to leave at the same time as their pet. We provide assistance regardless of type and number of animals. I know that there was a slide about this before about asking about pets. We also try to tell shelters here in Georgia or domestic violence service agencies here in Georgia, we try to tell them to ask if there are pets or other animals you're concerned about, because they may not realize that we've had calls for chickens before, and that she sold the eggs and that was her one source of income. So we try to make sure that people know that you also include or other animals you're concerned about, so that they know that there may be services available. To date, we've had birds, horses, iguanas, various pocket pets and ferrets, tortoises, rats, snakes. We had a prairie dog 2 years ago. So we've had a lot of different experiences. So I wanted to talk to you all a little bit about our experience with horses in our program. I am not an expert on the care of horses. That is why I rely heavily on our partners. So it's amazing that our model allows us to have these partners, and the horse rescues that we have worked with have been fantastic to work with for us. They offer us discounted services, discounted rates. This is the case with all of the pets. If we're working with a boarding facility that cares for dogs or horses, sometimes they may offer their services for free. Sometimes they may offer them at a reduced rate, but they're really amazing and work with us. And then we're able to pay for the veterinary care on site to have vets come out and take care of the horses on site. And then the horses stay there with them under their care. And an interesting story that we have of, we've had 6 horses to date, but 2 of those came from one client, and we happened to be, our outreach program was at a horse show here in Conyers. They have a really big facility. And so we were out at that and we had our booth set up, and someone came up and started talking to our volunteer. We had a volunteer staffing that booth and asking about our services, and they started telling her what we did. And she said, you know, I get up every morning, I put hay out for my horses, I fill their troughs, I leave and he comes behind me and he empties the troughs out. He does this, he does that. So she started sharing her story, and they said, call, we can help with horses. This is something that we can absolutely do. She did. We were able to take those horses in and get them healthy. We were able to reunite them once she was ready and had land and had a place for her horses to go. And we were at that very same event the following year, and the same volunteer was there working it, and she came up to them and hugged them, and the volunteer did not know, because so many times they don't see that follow through if they're not answering the crisis line. So they didn't even realize, and she came up and hugged her and said, because of you, I am safe, I'm alive, my horses are alive, I want to thank you so much. It was just this really beautiful moment. So that's why we try to go out to as many events as we can to try to reach people who may need our services, to let them know that there are services available to them. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about implementation and getting started. And I also would love for Mary Lou and Nancy to pipe up if you would like here. But as far as getting started, I know that they talked about the safe havens list before, but this, for us, this is also one of our biggest referrals. We use this all the time. We get calls from all over the country. So we're in this list a lot, referring people out. But it's a great place to start to see what is in your area, if there are people providing these services. And if it is like a local humane society, they probably don't have anything for horses and could really use that. Also contacting your local domestic violence shelter to find out if they have on-site accommodations for pets. I will tell you, here in Georgia, there is one domestic violence shelter that years ago, they've taken in dogs for years and years, but they actually had a stable for horses. And so they were able to provide on-site accommodations for horses at this. And I've never heard of another on-site horse accommodation before at a domestic violence shelter, but the shelter in Blairsville did for a while. So contact your shelter and see what their needs are. If this is something you're interested in starting, it can be really important to build that relationship in the beginning and say, this is why I'm here, I want to help. Contact your local animal control enforcement agencies, see what they're doing. When they have horse cruelty cases, what are they doing? The important considerations that I would say in providing this care is confidentiality. You know, questions you have to think about: are you going to allow allowing visitation of the clients? If so, because we know horses, you know, have unique needs. Some of them may need to be ridden more frequently than others. So they have very different unique needs. So are you going to allow that visitation? And if you do, are you going to have security? What are you going to do? You know, are you going to take precautions about maybe the abuser following them or something like that? Are you going to let the public know about the work you're doing, which can be really important for fundraising? But then, do they know where you're located? These are all things to think about when starting this work. And then for legal considerations, you know, are you going to take custody of the pets? We do a consent to care. That's the language we've chosen to use. I am more than willing for you all to view our paperwork, our forms. You can download them. I think they're actually, if you follow this link, which I'll have at the final slide as well. But if you follow this link of ahimsahouse.org review form, you just fill out your information, and then it will send you to our paperwork, and it may or may not email you a copy of it. but you can view the entire thing. If you do, there is additional, you have to go in yourself and enter like at least one pet for the drop downs to see the other information we collect. But as long as you put at least one in the pet field, you'll see everything there. So losing contact with an owner, what do you do if you're unable to contact them? We have emergency contacts listed in our intake paperwork. We also have release of information with domestic violence shelters. So if we can't contact them, we're able to call the domestic violence shelter, send them our release of information, and have them tell us if they have contact with them or not. And so then that's why we also have, you know, policies in place about how long it is before an animal is considered abandoned. Here we went with state of Georgia laws based on any other care facility. So you'll see all of that in our paperwork, but that's just the legal protections for us. And those are things you want to consider. There's also a liability. There are also some liability language in our paperwork that I wanted to share with you. Those were written by our attorneys and what they recommended, but you know, feel free to have attorneys review it. If this is something you're interested in, you're more than free to use our resources, but just make sure that, you know, it goes with the laws in your state, and maybe consult someone on that. Did you all, I wanted to see if you all had anything to add to those, Nancy and Mary Lou, before I moved on.
No, Myra, that really is very complete, very impressive.
Thank you. So finally, the last thing I had was just challenges that we experienced when we got started. Just from the beginning, getting professionals to screen for pets, we've talked about that. That was huge. And getting referrals from other agencies, and then staff turnover. So when we finally did get an agency that would call us, oh, one person left and they're not calling anymore. So some things we did to kind of mitigate that: we joined the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence. We are a member program of that agency. We attend quarterly meetings with all of the executive directors of domestic violence shelters in Georgia, and also community-based violence programs in Georgia, so that we're at the table and that we work closely with them. They know we're there. We kind of stay in their face so that they know that. And we also attend family violence task force meetings that Nancy was talking about. That's what they're called here in Georgia. Every jurisdiction is required to have them by state law. And we started out attending 13 in the metro Atlanta area on a regular basis. And again, it was just to be at the table to let them know we're here. And now we are an integral part of the system, of the services system. And we have people referring to us from prosecuting offices and everything else, but it took a lot of work for us to get there. And as far as the domestic violence shelters go, once we, you know, they knew who we were and they started referring a little bit, we try to go once every 2 years because of turnover to every domestic violence shelter in Georgia and do a shelter presentation. And then we tell them just how easy this is for them. You don't have to do any of the work. We do it for you. You know, here's all you have to do. And then we actually created some inserts for them to put into their shelter manuals so that when there's turnover, when there's staff turnover, it's always there. And there's always an instruction sheet on how to access our services, so that we just provide it to them so that they can include that as part of their materials. And those are the things that we found to be the most helpful. And then that's all I have. Here is my contact information and the contact information for Ahimsa House. Again, our intake paperwork, there's the link to view it. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me. I don't mind answering questions about it. Most of those things have come up because of experience and you know, incidents that have happened. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Myra. Nancy and I operate at a kind of national bird's eye view, and I always love hearing Myra describe what they do because it's so detailed and complete and useful, and it's what she's doing on the ground. So I'm one of your chief admirers, Myra.
Thank you.
Yeah, you do absolutely incredible work, Myra. It's great to hear all about it.
Tessa, I wonder if I could just pose a quick question to Myra, which is, with the facilities you have worked with horse placement, do you think any of those would be willing to kind of share their experiences with any of the Homes for Horses Coalition members who might be thinking, you know, this is something we'd like to do, but would like to kind of see it from the horse facility point of view? Would they be willing to be in touch?
I can look into that. The one that I would recommend the most has actually never even had one of our horses. She's one of our biggest supporters, but we've always found other accommodations closer to where the actual client is, because we're serving all of Georgia, and she is just ready and waiting. And she is actually a judge, and she would be more than happy to talk about it, but she hasn't actually cared for our horses. But I will reach out to the ones that we have and see if anybody's willing.
That's a great point, Nancy, to have a perspective from a horse caretaker in that case. Does anybody have any questions for Myra or for Nancy or Mary Lou about our presentation or housing horses in this case?
I see that one of the audience members is a friend of mine, Grace Coleman from Crisis Center North in Pittsburgh, who mentioned to me that she's one of the few domestic violence service providers who has had experience with having to place large animals somewhere. And, you know, that's in Pittsburgh. So, you know, I imagine there are folks out there who, much like the domestic violence community a few years ago, you know, just in thinking about regular, you know, common companion animals, that, you know, this was kind of a new idea. And with the domestic violence community recognizing that there were potential clients whom they were not able to serve because of the lack of accommodations for pets, have, you know, realized that this is something they wanted to get involved with. Now large animals may be something where it's like, oh my gosh, you know, we've encountered this and not been able to do anything. So it's great that they are here along with the horse sanctuaries.
Absolutely. I'm grateful to everybody who joined us today and to all of our speakers who gave such an incredible, informative presentation. I think our members will really enjoy, you know, being able to access all this information, and it's a great resource to have. Our speakers today also provided me with some resources, their slides, information about getting, you know, more resources and more places to look on this subject. So I will be able to provide those resources to our members on social media, and I'm hopefully going to create a page and upload all of these resources on our website as well to start creating kind of a library of resources and great people to speak to about creating a safe haven in this case.
And Tessa, it occurred to me, you know, 5 minutes before the webinar started, that I will also send to you to include with those resources is the website to access getting on the mailing list for the Office of Victims of Crime at DOJ, because that's where the announcement for PAWS grants will come from. So if you think you might be interested in that, you know, the idea of getting resources to help, you know, become that kind of service, they should be coming out with something fairly soon, because I know Mary Lou and I have been contacted about being on their introductory webinar. So something's going to be coming out in, you know, maybe a month or two. So be looking for that announcement.
Yeah, that's a great point. Those resources are incredible, an incredible opportunity to be able to help. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Yes, absolutely. Have a great afternoon.
Bye,
Thank you.